Hello and welcome to Soups and Sabers. My name is Jordan. With me today is Logan. Harte Logan.
Jordan, getting over a cold. So I don't know what it was. Cold, flu, something got me. I don't know if it was
Yeah.
Vecna's curse. It might still be on me, Jordan. We'll talk about that. But
Yeah.
yeah, no, I'm finally on the mend. I should be back to work tomorrow. So, but feeling
Good.
better. How you doing?
Good. No, it's been we tried to do this last week. You were sick. So it seems like we're coming at this a little later, but I do want to just say as a programming note, this is not going to be our real finale coverage. We're actually going to do another finale coverage after this that discusses the real finale that is yet to be released. So when that is released, we will get back on here and talk the real finale. But
There's just so many plot holes, Jordan. I don't get it. No, I'm kidding.
But yeah, so we are here talking Stranger Things Volume 2 and Volume 3, the finale. I had my friend Chris on. We talked Volume 1, which ended very strong. People were saying, oh my God, they're sticking the landing, and this is a great cliffhanger for Volume 2. And then immediately Volume 2 comes out a month later, and people were pissed. Now, this is a show that ended up number 2. Is that what you said for you? So I guess give me your thoughts on, I guess, Volume 1, and then kind of we can then kind of segue into Volume 2.
I've gone back and watched the whole 5th season now. I've seen all of them except for the 7th, which I was just watching 3 times. And it season 5, volume 1 is still so very Stranger Things to me. That people I really do. I think that the writing is incredible. Not to say that the next 2 weren't, but like I'm just saying, looking at what I was looking at the end of volume 1 when Will uses his powers, it all still felt like, man, we are right back into this world. Obviously, it's progressed. The characters are older. There's higher stakes. And with higher stakes, Jordan, comes more of like a darkness to it. And I think for an 80s timepiece, like, kind of an ode to the 80s that the Duffers have written, this was a perfect start. These first 4 episodes ending with Will using his powers, which a lot of people thought might come. And when it did, Jordan, I mean, I still get chills thinking about that final episode in volume 1 where he's just cracking all of the old Demogorgons, Vecna style. And I mean, I remember Ashley and I watched it when it released. We stayed up until like almost 2 a.m. on Thanksgiving morning.
Wow.
Watching this, and Ashley and I and her parents are asleep in the guest bedroom, but we couldn't help be like, what the hell did we just watch? Like, what? Like, I haven't had that reaction because I did not watch Game of Thrones
Right.
live. I never had that reaction to television. I didn't watch Lost live, which is still one of my favorite shows. It's a top 10 for me, but I never had that. I don't remember a show that kept me so on edge where I'm like, I need this next season. I've had movies do that, right? I've had, like, when I've left Infinity War, I didn't watch that in theaters, but when I left it sitting here on the couch, I was like, I need that next one because Endgame hadn't come out yet. But yeah, that was an amazing first 4 episodes for me, and it brought me right back to Hawkins, which I really enjoyed.
All right, so let's, I guess, get into Volume 2, which started off with Chapter 5, Shock Jock, right? So this is the episode that is where we have the kidnapped children still believing that Henry had saved them. Holly and Derek do not buy that. And then Max and Holly are going through Henry's memories, trying to find a way out. We have them reanimating the Demogorgon to see if it can connect Will to the hive mind, which it does. And this is where we get the trailer scene of him yelling, telling them to run. And then Hopper and Eleven escaping from the military base with Callie. And the backstory of Dr. K using their blood to like impregnate people and try to get powers into babies. And then Dustin thinking that they're at the Hawkins lab, that there would be some sort of battery, is what they kept trying to call it, right? And it turns out to be much different than that, which Nancy decides to shoot, since they were trying to obliterate the battery and try to stop what they thought was going to, I guess, bring down the wall, right? If they had been able to depower it or whatever. So this was Christmas night. Did you watch all 3 of these that night?
Yes. Yeah, we
You
went
stayed up
home.
late on that too?
Yeah, it was 8:30 when we got home from a Christmas get together, and Ash and I watched it on my computer because the Airbnb or the apartment that my sister-in-law can get us, it didn't have a working TV with Netflix. So
Oh no.
I had to bring my laptop because I was like, I'm just gonna bring it because last time we stayed in one of these, they didn't have Netflix on the smart TV. It was like one of the older TVs. And sure enough, this one didn't. But luckily I brought my laptop. Otherwise, we'd have been huddled around a phone, which would have been brutal. But
yeah, for 3 episodes.
yeah, it'd been awful.
Yeah, because these were long too.
They were.
These are some long episodes. And then Escape from Camazotz was, the one where Holly and Max actually get out. We have Dustin realizing from Dr. Brenner's notes, right, that it is the Upside Down is not an alternate dimension, but a wormhole to another realm. And he's trying, Dustin's trying to stop Nancy from destroying it, doesn't get there in time. And then we have Henry, who is using Will to be able to track Max into the real world and sends the Demodogs after her. Hopper, 11, and Callie are going to connect with everybody in Hawkins. 11 helps Will. And then at the hospital, Lucas is joined by Robin and Vicky as they try to protect Max from the Demodogs. And Mrs. Wheeler saves them by blowing up a laundry machine. And, Max is getting ready to awake at the end of that episode. So, and then chapter 7 was The Bridge, which is where Max awakens in the laundromat of the hospital, and Dustin and Steve rescue Nancy and Jonathan as they think that they're about to die from the melting goo. And then we have Holly, who realizes she's not in the Upside Down and then has to go from Dimension X to the Upside Down. But before she can get there, Vecna pulls her back up. And then we get the Will coming out scene, right? So that way Henry cannot use that against him. Erica and Mr. Clark team up to try to they have to try to locate Dustin as well through their means. And Murray is there as well. And then Holly is beat up by a bunch of little kids. Very big little kid fight in this episode here. And Derek stays silent to protect his family. And then Henry links the 12 children and starts his plan. And that's kind of where we ended the episode. So volume 2 as a whole, when you're done huddling over that laptop, what was your thoughts? What are you actually thinking?
God, I wish I had a TV to see that. No. This again, and I know the luckily, again, Jordan, I wasn't really privy to the information online, obviously, because people either weren't watching it or had to wait till the morning to watch it, or weren't going to watch.
You're just watching it back to back to back. Right. You're not knowing how people are reacting.
Exactly right. And I had the normal reaction of, man, that was a lot of character building. That was deep. This was much more an emotional journey, and you needed that, right? Because of what you get in the finale, and we'll get there. But like, you needed that bridge of, in the first 4 episodes, we did get some building, but they kind of had to set the scene of like what was going on in Hawkins, how has it changed, introduce new characters, get us back on track, and then finally start to tell a little bit of the story of what's going on with Holly and them. In this next volume, natural progression would be to explain, all right, let's catch up with these characters. Where have they been? They're all with the people that they're going to be with in this, volume 2, which is what Stranger Things has always done. So it set up just like it had always normally set up, where there are a lot of meaty episodes. And if you aren't into the character building and you aren't into the dialogue and you aren't into like the deep, discussion and all you want is violence, then yeah, volume 2 probably wasn't your jam. But I think it was instrumental in what we got. Of This was a perfect way to kind of line up the stakes of what's going to happen in a 2-hour finale later on. And I thought volume 2 did a really nice job of giving us a lot of stakes, giving us a lot of internal, existential crisis, but also a lot of that existentialism that you needed to understand why Will was ultimately the one that Vecna went after when he first started this thing. And then you get the idea of how Sadie and how Max is going to really elevate this episode and these episodes. And again, I thought that it did a really nice job, volume 2, of just bringing us back to these characters that we love. And all of it, Jordan, made sense to what their characters were, at least in my opinion.
So I had watched. It took me longer to watch Volume 1 than it did to watch Volume 2 because of just life stuff. Volume 2 came out on Christmas night. I don't think we watched any on Christmas night because we got home at like 10 or 11. So we ended up watching chapters 5 and 6 the day after Christmas and watched chapter 7 on the 27th. And it was, I kind of was able to avoid a lot of the reaction as well. So I have a group chat with Ron and Chris, and I would tell them like, all right, I'm not getting to this tonight. Right? I think they watched it all on, or most of it on Christmas, and then the day after. And I was like, I'm getting none done on Christmas, right? And then I would tell them like, I only got done 2 on this day or whatever. So they didn't share their thoughts or anything at that point either. And then I was kind of like staying off Twitter and stuff because I was trying to avoid all that stuff. I actually thought episode 5 was the weakest of that bunch. That when I saw, and I really enjoyed episode 7. So when I saw the reaction to episode 7 after I caught up and get online, I was kind of taken aback by it, honestly, because I thought episode 7 was classic Stranger Things of coming up with the plan, doing this, doing that. Episode 5, I think I didn't like as much because we just had this badass moment of Will in episode 4. And then episode 5 is immediately him doubting himself again. And then I thought like after episode 4 and that scene of him like thinking of Robin's talk to him and everything, that he was like going to just be at that level for the rest of, like, kind of be at his, like, that was his moment. And then from there, he would keep getting like almost stronger. What happened was he kind of takes a step back and almost gets kind of captured where 11 has to go help him again. And I was kind of like, oh man, I thought we were getting like Will just being like a superhero now, right? And then he does kind of get there, right? But it was kind of like a step forward and then a step back in episode 5. And I was like, hopefully this doesn't last too long. And then by like episode 6 and 7, Will is thankfully that only lasted episode 5, and then he's kind of back on his trajectory to the point where I actually really liked the coming out scene. I know there are some people out there that are probably just homophobic in doing it, but I do see some legitimate critiques of it, I guess. But it's for me, it landed when they do. And I think one thing I liked about Volume 2 and the finale is the emotional stuff still worked for me at each scene. So if I'm tearing up at it or feeling the emotions, it's working on me that I can kind of let some of the other stuff slide, because at the end of the day, I care about the characters and I care about the emotions more than like, why didn't we learn about that stone that had the mind flare? Like, I don't really care about that, right? Like I care more about, and I think that's one thing that's kind of come up as well as I've been a fan of shows like Lost, right? Where some people will say they didn't answer that. And then for some of the times they say that they actually did answer that. But anyway, Like when they say they didn't answer the polar bears, I'm like, they actually answered that twice throughout the run of the show. But anyway, not to go on a lost tangent, but for some of the questions that people have after a show, some of them are very small things that I'm like, I don't really need them to explain that. Like, we're moved on. Like, if the emotional beat lands for me, then I can forgive more. If the emotional beats don't land for me, like on a show like Manifest, then the ending doesn't work for me as much. So I guess that's kind of what works, and maybe that's why it wasn't working for some people, is that these emotional beats weren't. But they really worked for me, especially this scene where he was coming out. Like, yeah, maybe like Callie's looking at him like, I don't even know who you are. Maybe she doesn't have to be there, but I think overall the scene really worked for me.
Yeah, I mean there is so much to kind of dive into, and I'm sure we'll get to a lot of it with the critiques. Jordan, I looked up articles for plot holes, right? I think this is the biggest where I kind of want to spearhead, not really an attack, but a pushback on, if you're listening to this and you believe in Conformity Gate and you weren't happy with the ending, and I get it. There are things that obviously they just didn't have time to really dive into. Like, we're not going to have 10 minutes of why Max and Hopper didn't have this huge reaction when they're like, "Oh my God, Hopper's alive," when clearly Max knew that Hopper was alive, because there is a connection that Vecna makes that would insinuate that Hopper did in
Right.
fact live, and she sees him in Russia alive. So there are so many things, Jordan. Um, Two things: media literacy is dead. I don't think we have the ability anymore, and I think part of this is because of algorithm, and part of this is because we expect so many different things to happen because of the shows that we have watched in the past, when you cannot and you should not compare what's actually happening in a story to another story, because we feel like we should get that same kind of element in the two different stories. So for instance, the huge things that happen in Game of Thrones, which I think is the real Lost in Game of Thrones, really has kind of shaken, and I'm not just saying it's just those two, but like, you got Infinity Ward, you have all these huge plot twists that have landed so very well or so very wrong, that everybody kind of expects this huge ending to be a big blow up and things to happen, and then we can kind of settle with the pieces that happen when the fallout happens. I don't think Stranger Things has ever been that. If you think about the idea that they bring in characters to kill them off, they have never killed a main character. So I don't know where you thought maybe, and I almost posted this as I posted to get ready for season 5, like, they're not going to kill any of the main characters. I
Right.
just had
Right.
this feeling. I was like, the more I'd listen to the Duffers, the more
I
I'd
said
listen
that,
to the
by the
cast.
way. I said that
Yeah.
on this show last
Yes.
episode when we talked
Yes.
about Stranger Things, because I was like, this show, and you've made this connection in the text message we were sending too, but it's the Goonies, right?
Yes.
It is
So feel good.
80s adventure show
Yeah.
based off of those 80 Adventures movies, where the main characters, even though they're kids
Yeah.
and should probably die if this was real life.
Yeah, that's true.
Okay.
Yeah.
But it's not real life.
Right. Yes. Yeah. I mean, there's a reason, like every single 80s movie had that. Now, you want to turn this into a 90s timepiece, like, all the parents would have died. Like, that's just natural because Disney was killing everybody at that point. But I really do. I think that, Jordan, one, this algorithm problem we have is that people are like, they find one negative and that branches into multiple negatives. And then you just start nitpicking. Give me your favorite show, not you, Jordan, but if you're listening to this, or if they're out there, whoever's listening to this, give me your favorite show. I'll nitpick the crap out of it to where I'll find different things that they're not plot holes, Jordan. It's continuity, or we just don't have the time or budget to fit this in. It doesn't make sense to have 5 minutes. Everything needs to be solved. Jordan, there are so many shows that we have watched as consumers where you don't get answers on everything. You just don't need them. Like, you don't need them at this point in Stranger Things, and this point of they're 18 years old in the show. Like, what answers do you want? Do you want, like, Mike's, do you want what happened in Harry Potter? Like, I don't like the epilogue of Harry Potter in the movies. I think it's way too rushed. It's too much. Like, it just becomes like, whoa, whoa, whoa. Like, we're getting hit by different directions. I didn't like truly hate it, but like, it was just not really something I enjoyed because it was so rushed. They took, but again, I think there's a focus on this. Let's find everything negative. We came in, and I listened to your podcast last week where you said, I feel like people have come into the season ready to hate Stranger Things. And it really wasn't the true fans of the show. It were people that were latching onto it because, to be honest with you, season 4 might be one of the best or one of the best seasons in any TV show written because of what they did. They did turn it dark. They turned it twisty. They killed Eddie, which if you go back, Jordan, my favorite thing is like, well, they killed Eddie. That's a main character. Eddie's in like 1.5 episodes based on the time given to him. Like he is not in season 4 a lot. I think people got this idea he was in there a lot. He's really not. He's hiding most of the time. But again, I think that's a big focus is we focus on too many negative things. And we have this algorithm that it's, of course, if you get on TikTok and start posting, all you're going to see is the negative stuff. So once I started to like watch these videos of these conformity gate theories, I started getting all the conformity stuff. I never got anybody that was reviewing it going, oh, I love this. I never saw any of that. The algorithm found what we wanted to see, which is pretty genius. But
the tone has shifted a lot. What I will say is there was a sentiment after the finale, which we haven't really talked about yet, but after the finale, I saw a lot of people saying they stuck the landing. They landed the plane. Then when the conformity gate stuff started happening, you see a shift of people saying, oh, they've made an ending so bad, people are latching onto this thing. And it's like, so that whole thing actually started from the people that were upset Will and Mike did not end up together. Latching onto, that can't really be it. We have to have another episode. And then the people that were disappointed overall in the show latched onto it because they also thought that, oh, this has to be, and the connections were weird that people were making. They never made any sense. But anyway, when you're talking about unanswered questions, I've literally seen people say the Russian guard that helped Hopper come out of prison
Where is he?
was never followed up on.
Yeah,
because he's in freaking Russia. Right. There's no need to follow up on him.
Right. Yes. That's what was everything, though.
I saw somebody respond like, he's not going to go hang out in Indiana with teenagers. Right. Like,
like what's Murray doing at this point? I'm like, I don't really need what happened with Murray. Like, I really don't. Like,
we see him at
I'm just assuming
the graduation scene.
Yes.
That's all you need.
Yes. He's friends with Joyce and Hopper. This is what blows my mind. The media literacy part of this whole thing is like, use your mind to, that's why people hated the ending. Some of them, they're like, you have to be able to use your mind to tell you like what happens to these characters after. Not every show, Jordan, has an epilogue. They don't like, they just don't have epilogues. So you've got to kind of piece together based on your common sense in your mind. Otherwise, shows would go all the way from a character's birth to a death. And then it would be like, well, are they really dead or are they in heaven? Like, we'd start to get into that conversation.
Well,
like,
there is
the afterlife.
There's actually a show that just did this. Superman and Lois actually goes up to the moment where Superman dies, and people were pissed because they're like, Superman shouldn't die. And I'm like, look, you can't win. Like, so when it comes to finales, right? And this is I don't want to sound like I'm just saying this because I like the finale and other people didn't, but there is a trend, if you go back even pre-internet, of people not being happy with finales when it comes to shows. A big one that people used to always complain about is Seinfeld and that finale. I actually really enjoy that finale, and I called it well after the time when I already knew people hated it, and then I watched it and I'm like, that's what people hated? Like that was a fine ending. There were and then of course, as I was growing up, there was some really big finales that people did not like. Lost. That has kind of shifted. If you look at IMDb now, it's a 9.1, which is actually shocking.
Yes. Because it confused everyone. It was like,
but I think it's because people have since binged it and then felt it flowed on the binge, I guess, and liked it. But people that the biggest thing with Friends, and I think this is something true with Stranger Things too, is that there were people who watched for Lost, there were people that had watched season 1 and dropped out. But then when the finale comes, they tune on ABC and say, I want to see how it ended, though. And they kind of be like, that's it. And then there were people that did not understand the ending. Then there's people that intentionally did not understand so they could spread stuff, I guess. Or I don't know. But anyway. Then you have Game of Thrones. That ending did not go well for a lot of people, right? And then you have this one, which is probably like and I'm actually the same way that people already kind of pre-hated on Stranger Things before this final season. I see the same thing with the show The Boys, and that's ending this season. And you're going to see the same thing with that. I
Yeah.
guarantee when that season finale drops, whether it's good or bad, it's going to be hated on because it's the next popular show that ends. And it seems
Yeah.
like we are now in this cycle online where when something popular ends or it gets close to ending, we turn on it after a little bit and then we're going to hate on it. There are
Yeah.
some shows that obviously that does not happen for. Breaking Bad was seen as a very good ending. There were like Better Call Saul was seen as a very good ending. But more times than not, just through the history of everything, shows ending get really bad raps. There and what you're talking about too, of people waiting for a twist. You mentioned it with being like Lost or Thrones and stuff. It actually, I would say, predates this. There was, I'm sure there are people listening that know about the show Dallas. Not that it was a finale, but there was a twist because they had to write off one of the characters. They killed him off. And then he wanted to come back on the show a year and a half later. So what they did was they wrote that off as being a dream. That season he died was a dream, and he was actually alive the whole time. And that what that did, wipe out so many character progressions and moments, right? And then you have endings like the Bob Newhart ending where he wakes up at the end of his second sitcom and he's in bed with the wife from his first sitcom. And the implication is it was a dream. That whole second sitcom was a dream from his first sitcom. And then you have stuff like Saint Elsewhere, which was a hospital show that ends up being where it was all taking place in this snow globe that this kid is watching in and just making it up in his head. So you have these hallmarkers, right? And no shows since then have really done those endings, by the way.
Yeah, they avoid them. Yeah, they try to get the hell away from them. Yeah.
But what endings are always the ones speculated on by the fans?
Yeah.
Oh, when it was Lost, they're all dead the whole time.
When you have the twist. Yeah.
No, that's not it, right? And then this show, it's actually Vecna's vision, and it's not actually true. Or it was all a D&D campaign. Like these people latch onto these ideas that what we're watching, what we spent 10 years watching, doesn't actually exist and matter. And they try to act like that would be the good ending, but really that is like the worst ending that you can do because it just, those characters don't mean anything. None of that matters. You know, especially if it's all made up. Like, I don't want that type of ending, you know? So I think it kind of dates back to that. Just people always trying to predict the twist, and they come up with the most predictable twists, obviously. And then when it doesn't happen, they're either upset that that didn't happen, or I don't know. But every hit show, people are predicting it was all a dream, it was all a vision, it was all the time. And I don't know why that is the de facto one that people want to happen. Because those endings are not good.
Yeah. It like if you go into this volume and we can kind of talk about that, like into this volume, Jordan. So naturally the thought is that this is Vecna's vision, and that when Mike gets kind of knocked down in volume 1, that's where we would pick back up with the season. Like if Vecna's vision is actually real, that's their idea, is that this is when it would happen. I just like
one more episode would not be enough to wrap that up if we're going all the way back to volume 1.
And we can talk about that after the finale episode, because like there are so many things I can poke holes into why that just doesn't make sense to erase. But Jordan, there's so many things that happen in this volume that I think are so very important to understanding that these characters are building up to a closure in the chapter of life. We're not closing life itself. We're closing a chapter when kids, and this has always been, like you said, about the 80s, right? It's this timepiece. It's this ode to the 80s because the Duffers loved their childhood. They grew up in the 80s. They loved everything that they got to experience. They didn't really watch movies. They got to watch all these movies from their childhood, and it brought them back. So they wanted to make kind of this love story to it. And I think they did an excellent job in the way that they were able to tell these stories. I think the biggest things that people had problems with in this second volume and we can kind of start there, is like, one, the whole Dustin thing continues with Steve very early on in this volume of like Dustin continues to have these problems, and people were very angry at Dustin and the character because they want him to be better with Steve, because that was what carried a lot of the show in these last couple of seasons. I I think it was a beautiful build up to Jordan in their escape. He goes to put up a ladder, he almost dies, Steve does, and you finally come full circle of like, why is Dustin being so angsty and angry and dark? And why does he look so much like Eddie? It's because Jordan, he doesn't, for what we know, he doesn't have a male figure in his life that is a strong male figure like a father. We just always get his mother, and he looks up to Eddie. And once Eddie dies, he then has an attachment to the only other father like figure left, and that's Steve. And there is so much online about like, why was he so angry all season? It kind of ruined the season for me, especially volume one. And that's something we didn't really talk about. But like, I know you talked about it some, but like it was a perfect culmination to this moment of Steve, I don't want to watch you die because I've watched my friend die. I've watched somebody die that I love, and it can't be you. It would have never have been you. It could not be you that has to die. I don't want you to do this. I'm tired of watching you try to kill yourself. When Steve wasn't really thinking about like this, I'm trying to kill. I mean, he's just thinking I'm trying to be heroic and not run away from a fight, because that's something Steve has been running for the whole season or series, is that he tends to run from fights. He tends to run when things get hard. And that's Steve battling his inner demons, Dustin battling his inner demons, and it comes in a collision moment when they about go down the stairs on that ladder. But again, I wanted to get your thoughts on that. Like, does Dustin's angst and that stuff make sense to you? Because that seems to be a big point that people were kind of pointing at the whole series of like, or season. They're like, they kind of ruined Dustin this season because he had all this anger built up.
I mean, it is frustrating watching it because you just want them to be nice to
Right.
each other because you know that dynamic. But I had faith that they were going to fix it, and they
Yeah.
did. So, and it was a very good moment. That whole scene that you just kind of highlighted there, I thought was one of the stronger bits of Volume Two, and is something that just always works for me. Steve Harrington and Dustin are almost essentially the heart of the show.
Yeah.
That happened completely by accident because originally Steve wasn't supposed to
Right.
be involved with any of that. But
Yeah.
you know, they found. I love when shows can do that. When you get two actors that just have really good chemistry together, and it's fun writing for them, and then they kind of just kind of take over in essence, right? Of doing that. So I know you said you're watching Family Matters, right?
Yeah.
That happened
Oh,
with one
Urkel
character.
completely takes over. Yeah. It becomes the Urkel show. It's no longer Family Matters. It's Steve Matters. Like it, well,
Yeah,
Steve in
Steve's
both
the only
things,
one that matters. Yeah,
right.
that's
Steve
what
only,
it is.
that should be every show from now on. If there's a Steve in it, it's the only character that ever matters.
Yeah,
But yeah, no, I like you said, Jordan, I think you make a good point of, and to be honest with you, this show started as like, it was kind of like a Will and 11, right? By the time the show ends, it does kind of get back to that. But like, there are so many, I think, relationships that are more important to the show itself than anything or sorry, Mike and 11 can kind of do at the end. Like, yes, what happens at the end, and we'll get to that, but like in a later one. But like, I feel like building up to this, I mean, Hopper and Joyce's relationship from season 1 to season 4 is top notch. Like, Winona Ryder and David Harbour have great chemistry. I mean, you're talking about the three boys and Caleb, Gayton, and Finn that have really good rapport, and I think that's what carries that show. But I think you look at all these side, like, Sadie with Millie, like that's got good chemistry. Natalia with Charlie, that's got good chemistry. Like Maya Hawk, they bring in and has chemistry with everybody.
mhm.
So there's so many things that they have great chemistry with, and they've got to build out these relationships. And volume 2 does that in so many ways. Like, Jordan, I thought a genius aspect, which I know a lot of people disagree with, but the genius aspect for me was, and I didn't think of this going into the season, pairing up Maya Hawk and Robin with Will and Noah
Yeah,
Schnapp,
yeah.
like, was brilliant. Like, they have some of the best scenes. That scene where they're on the tower talking about like Steve Harrington, you sold Steve Harrington? Why?
Yeah.
Like, that's one of the best parts of
And the
volume
tunnel
2.
talk, right, from
Yes.
episode 4 was very big. But
Yep.
I mean, it's one of those things where they introduce that character in season 3, and she immediately becomes a fan favorite.
Yeah.
And as we started to know more about Will, you're like, man, she could probably teach him some stuff about how it is just to exist as a
Right.
as a homosexual in the 80s.
Yes, in Indiana.
In Indiana, right,
Right.
right. So, and it was built up very well, like in that hospital scene when he sees
it's
them
great.
kissing, and
Yep.
she thinks, oh my God, he's probably going to be very like
To out
judgmental
me.
about this
Yeah.
and out me. And he's wondering like, oh my God, how does she know? Because that
Yeah.
was a question I always had as a kid, I guess, was like, when it is more like in the 80s or earlier, when
Mhm.
it is more I guess, I don't know, it was never really
Looked
illegal
down
at that,
upon.
but looked
Yeah.
down upon, right? Is how do you even broach that subject without being
Right.
scared that somebody's going to then
Yep.
shut you down, and then
Tell
even if they
everyone.
shut you down, tell everybody and like ostracize you. So kind of like that's what Will's thoughts are as
Mhm.
he's going through that. And we get that nice conversation where she sees how he's acting towards Mike, and she's like, oh my God, this was me like years ago. Like,
Yeah.
I have to tell this kid about this. So
And then, like, as far as not to just, but like to kind of progress things, like,
mhm.
so then you talk about like just going through each of the relationships that happen within this aspect of it. You also have Jonathan, right? And you have Nancy, that relationship, and it coming to a head in this volume. What were your thoughts on that? Like, how do you feel like that ended? Because that one actually floored me. I was actually shocked, but very happy with the result of like what they end up deciding as you get to episode 7, because that's when they kind of decide what their fate might be with Nancy and all of this Nancy, Steve, Jonathan stuff.
Yeah, I guess I've never really been super invested in the Steve, Jonathan, Nancy love
Right.
triangle the way some people are, I guess.
Yes.
But it just kind of felt like it was going to progress to the point of Nancy being with Jonathan because they've been together since season 1, right? At the end of season 1 or whatever. And then have kind of continued to find themselves here. But we've seen in like season 4 when they lie to each other about getting into college and stuff, right? Like we've seen those moments where we're like, why aren't they just being honest? And I think this is probably the most realistic option here. Is they realize they're not good together, but she also doesn't want to be with Steve. And it is very hard for people to stick together their whole lives from high school on. Okay. So the fact that we have a relationship like Max and Lucas that seem to be potentially, however you want to think about it, most likely they're going to end up together, and that's fine, right? Like, that's good. But to have like 2 or 3 relationships like that in the show would be a little more like these characters, Nancy and Jonathan, would have just gotten divorced later on down the line.
Yeah,
because they weren't good for each other in that regard. So, I really like how this was set up with the wedding ring, and you're thinking, oh my God, when is he gonna propose? She's already kind of cold to him right now, and we have Steve trying to horn in on this, right? Like, but getting to that moment where they are thinking they're going to die, and they're like, oh my God, I was going to propose because I thought it would fix this. We're not, like, that wouldn't work, right? That's just delaying the inevitable. It's kicking the can down the road. And they come to terms with that as they're dying. And then, of course, they don't die. And some shows would have been like, oh my God, that's a sign we should be together. But they rightfully do the thing of, no, let's stay broken up. This wasn't working for us. And I really liked that because I don't think she needed to stay together with her high school sweetheart for the rest of her life.
No, I totally agree. I thought it was brilliant the way that they did it, because they just start presenting cases as to why they're not compatible. And I think the other thing too, and they build this up too, and it is not talked about enough, is that, you know, once you're trauma bonded with people, that relationship becomes very tight. But it's almost like family rather than, you know, you're not going to fall in love, and it's a different kind of love. And that's something that they say right in that in that room, where they end it by saying, I love you, Nancy Wheeler, I love you, Jonathan. But I think another thing that this show teaches is that there are different kinds of love, and this form of love is, we've been through a lot together, I love you for that. But sometimes it's okay to admit that we're not compatible, right? Max and Lucas are very compatible. Joyce and Hopper, very compatible. But like, there's a lot of this where, and you can see this with Nancy and Steve, is Nancy has a lot of hesitancy about Steve, and she could have that same moment with Steve Harrington, like that same kind of, you know, you are in love with me, but I am not in love with you in the way that you are in love with me. Like there's a lot of that. And I think that's important to realize for kids that are growing up in high school. I think this is a perfect example for them to be like, you know, there's different levels of love. It doesn't have to be the romantic kind. It can be a friend kind. You can be family without having to actually get married. Like that is something that all kids should understand, is that not all relationships end in a positive way. And it's just so happens that, and I think that this is kind of skipped over too, is that it's beautiful in the way that it stops that floor from sinking, because they've now faced their inner demons, the things that have troubled them, just like Will coming out. That is their like their inner existential, like, this is why I exist, is because I love Nancy. No, it's not that. There's more to you. There's more to you as a character. There's more to you as a human than to just love somebody because you're put in the same circumstances and have gone through things together. And they admitting to that, admitting that they are not in love, is what ends up stopping that goop from killing them both. Because I thought that's where we might have been. I was like, I'm not gonna lie, that was the only time, Jordan, that I thought maybe they kill both of them, which would have been wild. But I was like, man, this is getting pretty dicey here. We might lose one of them. So that's the only time
I still
ever
had
thought.
faith. I still had faith
Yeah.
at this moment nobody was dying.
Yeah. Yeah.
I was
so,
like, they're not gonna do this.
yeah, I was like, there's no way. And then I was like, oh, maybe we might get a little bit of a Titanic situation here.
As I talked about last, when we talked volume 1, when Ted Wheeler gets freaking thrown across the room, I was like, oh my God, they are going to do it. Okay.
Right. Yeah.
And then they don't. And
Yeah.
that moment when Ted and Karen Wheeler survive, I'm like, nobody's dying in this show.
Once Karen Wheeler,
once she comes out wheeling the oxygen tank and actually kills Demogorgons, I'm like, nobody's dying in this show.
Yes, absolutely.
Which is fine. Not every show has to have the main characters die.
Yeah.
I don't think that adds any stakes at all. So,
yeah.
I guess let's get to the finale, right? The right side up.
Yeah.
So what it's called. We've been kind of talking about it and beating around the bush about it, but the plan is to let Vecna start his descendants, and then they go up to the radio tower, and they'll let the abyss get close enough for them to then puncture it, get in there, stop Vecna, and then be able to stop it before the abyss collides in with Earth and destroys the Upside Down and Earth. One thing I'll say about Volume 2 before we get into this, not that this really bothers me, but I do see the complaint when people say, man, a lot of times they are just talking about something and then say that again, and then it comes up with a plan. Because that happened a lot in Volume 2. I think it happened like 3 times, where you get Steve's plan, the popcorn plan for episode 5, right? And I think Erica's plan with Mr. Clark or something, right? Like 3 times they're all like, wait a minute, yes, say, like, they get an idea from something that is totally unrelated and then have to explain it to the whole class of how this works out. But I'm fine with that. That's what the show is. But I'm just, when people complain about that, I'm like, okay, I guess I can see how that kind of rubs you the wrong way. But chapter 8, they are executing the plan that Steve came up with. And, everything is going fine for a bit. There was a moment in this finale where I was like, ugh, I don't like that. And that's when I thought that it ended up being all right. But it was when Hopper shot the tank,
Yeah.
and at first I was like, oh, okay, that's going to pull 11 out. And then when they try to fake us out with her getting hit by the bullets, I was like, don't like that. And then it is, of course, part of Vecna's vision again. And I'm like, okay, that's fine then. That's fine. But at first I was like, oh my God, if this is how they kill 11 off, I'm not going to like that. But we get to, yeah, so Hopper and 11 are going into the Upside Down. They're going to go into the water tank and try to have Callie and 11 connect with Max in the real world to then infiltrate Henry's mind to stop him, while the rest of the crew are going up the radio tower and going into the abyss to defeat Vecna physically. We get then to see the live Mind Flayer, the real body of the Mind Flayer. We get Joyce chopping off Vecna's head at one point. That was cool. And everything pretty much is starting to end. We got like 50 minutes left. And then we get the military coming in, arresting them all. And then 11 sacrificing herself. And then we get 40 minutes of closure, which was great. We'll talk about that, I'm sure. But what was your thoughts here? And I guess one thing I'll say that has never worked for me for this show at all is the military aspect. I just don't care. I just don't care about the military side of it at all. I'm always more interested in the Upside Down and the Demogorgons and the Mind Flayer, stuff like that. Never really cared. I did not think Linda Hamilton was, as Dr. K, was very intimidating. I didn't really care for that character. But you needed somebody there, I guess, to be a thorn in the side. But what was your thoughts on the finale when we get like halfway through the finale and everything's almost closed up?
This one for me, this finale was, I personally think, one of the top episodes of the season. I felt that we got closure on everything that we needed closure on, except for one thing. And I do somewhat agree with you on the military aspect of things. I get that they always kind of needed that, the I think he calls it the black hand at one point for D&D. Mike does in his storytelling. You kind of needed another entity to try to kind of, I wouldn't say they're trying to also defeat Vecna. I think they have a totally different goal, obviously, in creating super soldiers. And I think that's something that they needed maybe throughout this series to be more explicit about, because I feel like that was something where people were like, well, why is K around now? Like, why is the military stepped in? I think it makes sense. The military stepped in because they obviously know something's going on. They just don't know what. I think maybe an explanation of like, these super soldiers are only possible by going in the Upside Down and finding out where they're getting all these powers from. Because I think that is something that's never like you sat them down and tried to really explain that out. And we'll get to the epilogue like right before the final episode or final epilogue, where the military interferes and 11 escapes. I think there's a lot where people are like, that's one of the biggest things that people try to poke holes in, is like, why aren't all these people arrested for what they've done, these war crimes? Which I'll give you my thoughts on that one, why. But I think that this finale wraps up everything we need to wrap up. And I feel like there are multiple things that happen that can kind of explain away some of the theories and stuff online for all this Conformity Gate stuff. I feel like there's some things that people may have missed or are kind of overlooking because they wanted to fit into those narratives of like, we're going to get another episode, which I just feel like there's so many things that point to why we're not going to get another episode, or why that was never a plan or idea. So, but I love the finale. I think it's very well done. And I think that last scene, if you take it for what it is one of the best ways that a show has ended in quite some time, because I felt like it was a great callback to the storytelling that takes place.
So I guess, do you, the big part of this, right, is at the end when they're saying, I believe.
Yeah.
How about you, Logan? Do you believe? Is 11 alive?
Here's my thing, right? Is when I initially watched this, I thought no. But the more that I think about it, the more that I kind of have this idea of like what the Duffers might be trying here. And I think about the idea that it is an 80s piece. I do believe that she is. And the reason why I think that she is, I think that there's no way that this is even before the D&D thing at the end. Mike realizes the speaker thing and the sound, like the sonic things. He notices those before the epilogue. He kind of notices that, and they make a point to show you that like these are here, so she shouldn't be able to use her powers. And the fact that her nose doesn't bleed, and the fact that like we don't know how much time really elapses before Callie and 11 have to do their thing to make it feel like there's a lot of people saying like that was way too much time, she was dead already. There's no way that she could have created that. But yes, I do think that the idea is that the Duffers want you to obviously come up with your own ending, but I do feel like they left it more open that she is alive than she's actually dead, in my opinion.
Because I want her to be alive, so I think I do believe, but I think I'm believing in vain a little bit here because there are things that I think, okay, or like the speaker thing, okay, that's true, right? But then you're also wondering, Callie was like on the verge of death before they even went into the abyss to kill Vecna. Then they had to try to get out of there. So you're talking about, I mean, I don't know how long it is, but it is talking about a long stretch here. There is some plausible deniability with that, though, because they never actually say she's dead when Hopper and 11 go up to the roof with Murray. They just kind of give a look, and Murray is like, oh my God, like, he thinks that means Callie's dead. But she would probably be dead. It's tough to know. And then you have the fact that the building where she was in is what blew up the roof. Like the roof blew up with the music, right? So, I mean, if she's still in there, not looking good there. But overall, I left the episode thinking she's alive. She's alive because I want her to be alive. And I actually really like the open-ended nature of it because look, if you wanted your character death, there it is. But if you didn't want a character death and you wanted them to be fine, then she's alive and she's finally living, having that life. So that's another reason why I think she's alive is that like they have that whole conversation with Hopper and her where he's like, you deserve to have like a life. Now she keeps saying like it's my choice though. So I mean, obviously she could have chose to give herself up, but if she can finally have that life where she is getting a fresh start, would be really nice. I kind of thought, and this could have been an easy way to do it, and take it for what you. I kind of thought if they killed Vecna, maybe you could take her powers away, and then the government would have no need for her, and she could live happily. Right, but they kind of kept it of, I guess, she's having her powers, so the government would always keep coming after her, so she either has to fake her death or give herself up, essentially. So, yeah, I don't know. I think I really like that it's open-ended to kind of let people think, oh man, Mike's delusional, or be like, yeah, I'm delusional like Mike. Yeah, she's fine, she's alive, she's found that place with the 3 waterfalls and is living happily in like Finland or wherever she went.
So like this is where we can like I feel like get into like really, this is where I kind of want to flatten the conformity gate. So my biggest thing that I've come away with listening to all of this and going back and forth with you and talking to other people.
Also, real quick, if you're wondering why we have to squash it because it's after January 7th and it never happened, they've pushed the date again. People, I've seen
12th.
People say January 12th and
the documentaries.
Later, so,
there's this idea now that documentary is going to be very Nightmare on Elm. The 7th movie of Nightmare on Elm Street is a documentary. It's filmed like a documentary, but all of a sudden, you've got Jason or not Jason. What's the that's the
Freddy.
wrong one.
But
Freddy.
I do want to say, I know people that have know that movie and say that whatever these people are spreading is not exactly what happens.
Yes. Yes.
So they even have that part wrong. But yes, go
Yes.
on.
There's this idea that Freddy takes over the documentary, but it's actually more a play along of like there's moments where there's in it, then there's moments where it shows behind the scenes. And then there's this big thing where Jamie Campbell Bower is not seen at the last table reads in a lot of this documentary series. So they're going down that rabbit hole. And when Jamie was asked about it, he said he was sick. So there's this whole thing, right? And Conformity Gate, it's just going to keep getting pushed back. It's very and I'm a Swiftie myself, but it's very Swiftie-esque. Is you want to believe and everything is an Easter egg and everything leads to something else. That now we're moving on to the New Year, Orthodox New Year instead of the Orthodox Christmas and whatever. But my biggest thing to really push back, Jordan, the one thing that when I encounter people that are like, "What did you think about Conformity Gate?" or "We're going to get another episode eventually," or whatever it might be, which I think it'll start to die out once January obviously ends. But my biggest thing, Jordan, is what would be, you tell me what then would be the ending? Like, what is the ending? And the other thing I'd push back on is why would Vecna show Mike everything ends in a happy way except for maybe 11? So what is the point? And what connection would Vecna have to Mike Wheeler? And why is this all of a sudden become his infatuation is with Mike instead of Will? Because it's always been Will. It's never been Mike. He's never bothered Mike. Mike hadn't even visited the Upside Down until the last season. Why all of a sudden does he turn his attention and go, no, I'm going to go after that kid? Because he's attached to 11? Like, that doesn't make sense because he always
Vecna
knew.
watched season 1 and thought Mike was
right.
the main
He
character.
rewatched him. Yeah, he rewatched him. He's like, oh, wait a minute. I went after the wrong kid. No, because Mike's very strong in his mind. Like, that's not. And my biggest thing is just like, what then? And I know what a lot of it is. A lot of this is because, I've even got, Ashley, she won't listen to this. Ashley kind of wants there to be more. Matt's wife, who I hang out with all the time, she kind of wants more. So there's this thing. There's people want a more high stake ending, or people don't want it to end. That's basically what Conformity Gate has stemmed from. And my biggest thing is like, one, how would you write it then? What other ending would you have? Why did the D&D game, like that D&D game was a brilliant ending. How else do you end it that way? And then my last thing would be, if you wanted the highest stakes of all, Jordan, killing L, and you can believe that L is dead. If you wanted the highest stakes possible, you have your main death, because Jordan, Stranger Things doesn't exist without 11. That's it. Yeah. Like that is it. That's all that needs to be said. Like, if you wanted your depth, if you wanted all the depth that you could possibly have, then believing L is dead is you won. Vecna won. He killed 11. It just doesn't make sense to me. Like, none of this makes sense to me.
Yeah, it is, not to dive too much into it, but there is this conspiracies have just on social media have just been able to infiltrate all fandoms all the time. There was a whole conspiracy that James Gunn was canceling the Batman Part 2 so that way it wouldn't interfere with his DCU Batman, when really all it was Matt Reeves was taking his sweet time with the script to get it right. And guess what? The Batman Part 2 starts filming in the next couple months and is casting right now. Then there's the conspiracy of what we just watched isn't really the end, because I either don't want it to be end, or I didn't like the ending, or the characters I like together didn't end up together. So I keep, instead of writing fan fiction, I think that the writers have wrote it and it's coming out soon.
Yeah.
Part of this, too, I think part of it might also be related, Logan, to this. I don't know if it fully is, but we don't let TV shows rest anymore, or movies. Right? Like, we were talking about Scrubs. Scrubs is coming back,
the
15
reboots
years later.
Yeah, the reboots
15 years later.
really...
Will and Grace came back and uncanonized
Frasier.
their ending. Frasier came back, but like Will and Grace literally said, like, that ending we did for the finale doesn't count because it will interfere with our new season of Will and Grace. And guess what? Like, there's precedent for people to be like, well, that show overwrote their ending when they came back. This show can do it. And there's already people saying like in 2042, the Duffers are going to come back and make another reboot of this. And it's going to be taking place in the 90s. And it's going to be these characters grown up now or something. Like, we don't let things end. Let things end for a little bit. I don't think we always need reboots, sequels, spinoffs. We are getting a spinoff of this show, which is doing a spinoff the right way, I think I would say, which is
Gap
new
years.
characters, new locations, new decade.
Yeah.
The only thing that's going to connect, it seems like, is that Mind Flayer stone from the end of the season. So it will be, I guess, adjacent to the Abyss. But I don't need a prequel to this. I don't need everything to become a franchise, is kind of the way I would put it. Not every show or movie needs to have sequels, spin-offs, reboots down the line, etc. Like, sometimes we can just have things be things, right? You know, like some of my favorite movies are one-offs, right? That don't need to have a sequel. Though they've tried. There are movies that have totally tried. You know, for a while they were trying to do some sort of Ferris Bueller spinoff with the valet drivers. That's finally dead, but I'm like, why? We don't need this stuff. Like, that part was never the best part of Ferris Bueller. Like, we don't need the valet drivers. So in people's heads, they have devised ways that this can continue and continue and continue, and I just don't think it's needed. We are getting an animated show, which is very 1980s, of each movie getting a animated series, like the Ghostbusters, Back to the Future. I mean, all of those shows, movies had animated series to try to appeal to the kids afterwards. But we are getting one of those set between seasons 2 and 3, which seems tough because that was a time where the gate wasn't open. So I wonder how they're going to approach that, I guess. But either way, I'm happy that it seems like the Duffers say, I was watching interviews with them where they're like, these characters are pretty wrapped up. We're not going to touch these guys again. And I think that's good. I don't want them to even appear in the spinoff. You know, I don't want like a 1990s Steve Harrington showing up randomly with whatever group of characters the spinoff is going to have.
Right. When he can go, I've seen this before. I know what happens with that thing.
Also, the Upside Down is gone, so it's not going to have the Upside Down, which is the only thing these kids are experienced in.
Yes. But yeah, I mean, you just, Conformity Gate has become more, Jordan, I think, a great description of, like, it indicates that we are conforming to everything needs to be exactly the same and in the exact same, and AI is going to create all these endings that we all want, and like it's just becoming to a point where we are conformity. Like, we conform to everything. We need everything to be exactly as we want it to be, and there can't be any other opposition. And it's become very dangerous in the way that we think, because we need everything to wrap up like we want it, and that's just not the way life goes, right? None of our lives go that way, where everything's a happy ending. Everything needs to end exactly how we want it to end. Some things just, your story just doesn't end. You know, it continues on and on. And I think that's something that the Duffers really tried to push home here. But the finale, I mean, getting back to the actual finale itself, I thought did a great job of, you know, right off the bat, Jordan, it felt like high stakes because the tower starts to come down, and then everybody thought Steve was a goner, which I thought was brilliant. That's when you know the Duffers are very obviously aware of what fans think. They're like, let's throw Steve off this tower and give him 7 seconds of hell, because obviously that fades into the fandom of, or the fan theories. But I really did. I thought that was beautifully done, where Jonathan saves Steve, right? And it, from then on, it was like, man, this was high stakes. And then we get into when they do reach the Abyss, Jordan, and obviously people had problems with that. But then we also get, coinciding with that is this whole Kali and Hopper. I agree with you. It'd have been a kind of a crazy way to end 11, but also my thing was I'd never believed she was actually dead or that he shot her because we don't actually ever see anybody die in Vecna's visions. They're just Vecna's visions. And that's clearly what he had placed in front of Hopper as this vision because you have the chemical that was the one that ends up taking his daughter's life. And then he was so twisted and warped that he was able to kind of use Hopper's mind in a moment of weakness to be able to be like, all right, you're scared that somebody else, like a daughter, will die. I'm going to use your mind then. And I think that's where he's preoccupied. I think that's when people are like, well, where are the Demogorgons? Where are the Demodogs? Where are the Demobats? I think that's where I personally think Vecna was like getting attacked from all sorts of different directions. You've got Holly in the gang attacking him. You've got Max and them attacking him. He's being attacked from all sorts of different directions. I think he was more invested in like, what is 11 up to? Because that's the one I've got to be truly concerned with. And I think that's where, the Mind Flayer and
you mentioned the Demodogs, the Demobats, and all that kind of stuff. To be honest, they never even crossed. They never even crossed my mind,
yeah.
To be honest, it was to me what that is people asking for is maybe they thought it was too easy, so they wanted a little bit more of a roadblock. But like, it doesn't change that much because then what? Will just hive minds them and
yes, exactly,
and then it's done, right? And then it maybe adds another 2 minutes to the runtime. Right. Like, it doesn't really add much to it. So they never even came up in my mind. I'm thinking that they're preoccupied doing something else. I don't know.
And going back in the series, they never existed with the Mind Flayer anyway. Anytime the Mind Flayer is around, like in season 3, the Mind Flayer is at the mall. There's no Demogorgons. There's none. Like, they're nowhere to be found. Right. So all of a sudden they're like, oh, let's put them back in because, every time that they're not around and you never see the Demodogs with the Demobats or the Demogorgons with the Demobats, like, I think it all culminates into this one monster. Like, when this one monster is being used, I think he actually does absorb all the power of, like, he is the hive mind. Like, that could be a reason.
Could be. And then we get, one thing that kind of stood out to me is, and I saw somebody mention this online, and I think that's the read I got of it. I want to see if you got the read on it. But the scene where we have Robin, Steve, Nancy, and Jonathan on the roof, and they're setting their plans for the, every month we're gonna meet somewhere, and then they're like, well, I can't do every month, every other month or whatever. Those meetings are never happening, right? That's the read I got of it because that's an adult thing.
It's an adult thing to say. Always,
we're gonna meet here every single week, and then this week I can't do this. This week I can't do that, and everything. I mean, sometimes even just scheduling podcasts, right?
Right. Yeah, yes, I think it's a perfect social commentary for what life really is, and I think Jordan, when you're younger, like Lucas and all of them, even because they're seniors in that epilogue, like the belief is that when you're an 18-year-old or even when you're a 22-year-old, like in college, you still think that, and even I would even say into your early 30s, you think like these are always going to be my friends. But life happens, Jordan, and I can honestly tell you that aside from Matt, because he lives right down the road, we live very close in proximity, and we go to trivia night. We make it a point to go. Like, unless you're making it a point to see somebody, and even when I make it a point to see you, Jordan, you and I talk every week usually, but on podcasts. Like, yes, we text, we have, and we do. We're more. I think we are given a lot more tools to connect than what people used to be able to do.
Yeah, but back then they would have to schedule these things. They would have to call each other on landlines and be like, when are we meeting up?
Yes. But I think it's social commentary, perfect social commentary. And it shows that in the epilogue. It shows, and that's another thing that I felt like this is a running theme and people just don't like this idea. But the whole thing is a coming of age story. It shows different chapters in your life when you're coming of age throughout the whole series. And I think that's where people kind of miss the mark. They want these kids to be adults, and that's not what reality is. Like, these are just kids still. They just graduated high school. Things are going to happen to them. I think it's perfect that they show Holly's friends group picking up the story once again, where they're like, oh, we need to start telling our own stories. I loved that when they bypass Mike and they're like, get out of the way. Like, I want to tell these stories. And you've got that new core group that could, like, in my mind, those kids are right now still in Hawkins playing D&D. Holly is the storyteller, just like her brother. She's got the Holly, the heroic kind of mentality. And then you've got Mike and them going their separate ways, as they do in college, as you do in life. Then you've got the kids that are in college, that they're older kids, that they're going to start to get into adulthood. You can see them talking about their jobs that they're having, right? And then you see Joyce and Hopper leaving for Montauk to close that chapter of their life, which a lot of parents do when there's an empty nest. They leave and go elsewhere. It gives, and also another thing that I thought about too is 11, as much as I love 11, she does kind of, in a way, I think, because she's not as progressed, we don't know what 11's life would have been outside of this. But Jordan, I start to picture in a life where it holds Mike back, 11 being around. It anchors Hopper to Hawkins, because I don't know if they would have just uprooted 11 and take, because she can't, like, can she survive on her own? Like, she's not going to go use her powers. Like, there's a lot of things that I would have been questioning, like, well, how does 11 exist in this world that we see, right? She's not just going to go off with Mike. Like, what's the ending there? So Mike's story would have been kind of disrupted by 11 being around. Like, what did you want them to be? So yeah, no, I think it all makes sense. I love Will's ending. I love that he moves. I love that Jonathan moves. I love that they're moving to New York, because that's where both of them are. I just, everything about it. And then you have that final scene of, like, I think it is, I mean, I still get chills in thinking about, like, that final D&D game that they're playing. And it's just so brilliantly written, the way that they do it.
Yeah, I kind of thought, like, my prediction was they would do a D&D scene, but I was kind of thinking, like, it'd be them meeting up as an adults or something, like, to show that they still hang out in the future. But it was a good way for them to close out their current chapters, as we also get to see kind of flash forwards a bit of, like, you know, Max and Lucas at the movies cuddling, and as Mike
finally
said,
getting their date.
falling deeper and deeper in love, right?
Yeah.
And you have Dustin going to school and then hanging out with Steve, you know, and then you have Mike, who's writing his own, I guess, tabletop RPG type thing that he will call Stranger Things, right? Like, if you take the credits literally. And then you have, you know, Will, who gets to meet somebody when he goes to college at a bar, and, you know, they presumably end up together. So each of these characters got closure and wrap up, and enough where you can be like, you know, that's exactly how I see it going on, or maybe there's some wiggle room there for you to kind of add your own thoughts. It only shows us brief little glimpses of their future. You don't have to lock anything in as a viewer. You can be like, yeah, that's what I want, you know.
It literally looks like a semester later. Like, Will being in a bar, it makes sense he's 19. Dustin being at school, it makes sense that he's 19. Looks like he's done that enough with Steve. That's kind of their thing. When school ends, he goes with them. Like, Max and Lucas, that relationship, that love, that what do you call it? The commitment that Lucas shows throughout the whole series, no matter what Max is going through, he's always going to be there for her. Joyce, and, you know, then you got Jonathan, who's producing that consumer. Like, that's perfect, because you go back to season 2 and you've got Bob teaching Jonathan about how to use a camera, and that's perfect. And consumerism, that makes sense. Like, if he feels like somebody that would be against the man, against the consumers, you know, all this capitalism, like, he'd be against it. You got Nancy, investigative journalist, like, you see that with the Creels. Steve, I think, is a perfect ending. Like, they give this guy
baseball coach.
What is outside? Like, Steve is great with kids. Steve is good at coaching. Steve also is a perfect teacher. I feel like he would be excellent in giving advice, like he always does. He's very good with the kids. He's always got that trust of, like, yes, he's kind of an authority figure, but he's not authoritarian. That'd be bad. But he's an authority figure. And then you've got Robin, and I feel like hers is perfect, because I feel like she's just trying to find her way in the world, and that's ultimately what Robin is trying to do, is just, where do I belong? And she's still having that identity crisis where she's like, how do I fit into a world that doesn't usually accept people like me?
Right.
So I mean, I thought it was all beautiful. I'm really sad we didn't get Mr. Clark. Like, what's that dude doing? Right. Like, but it just becomes so much. Yeah. What's he doing? What's Erica doing? I'm like, Erica's still in school. So probably, you know, 9th grade. That's what she's doing. 10th grade, whatever she said. Like, Clark is doing that. Murray's
we saw them all at the graduation scene, and I think that's all you really need.
Yeah. Ted Wheeler, I want to know, you know, if that's a divorce waiting to happen. It sounds like it.
Yeah,
So
Karen Wheeler
right.
is like, "Thank God Nancy didn't marry
Yeah.
Jonathan. She's not
Yep.
stuck like I am with
Yeah.
with her
See,
dad."
see what we've done here, Jordan, though? We used our context clues to create
Yes.
what could actually
Ending.
happen instead of
Yes.
just going, "Oh my god, they're just leaving all these characters in suspense and we don't know what happens with them."
Yeah.
So, just like, any other story that's ever existed in life.
Anything else about the finale before we wrap up?
I did want to talk about the fact that, like, I don't know if I've ever seen a TV show besides maybe like The Office, because I've watched enough behind the scenes stuff, but like the actual ending of, and I think Jennifer Aniston in Friends says that she got real emotional, but like the actual ending with these characters, Jordan, you saw real tears. Like these were real
Yeah,
emotions
they were saying
coming
goodbye
out of
to
the
each
act.
other.
Yes. And my
They
favorite
grew
thing.
up with everybody.
Exactly. And my favorite thing is, like, in this documentary that's coming out, they're showing like Millie and them all behind the camera when all the kids are up on the roof, and that's their final scene, and then they take a bow. And I'm like, why would you do a meta thing now and have Vecna come into the documentary and kill everybody? Like, why would you have this meta episode after all these great stories that are going to be told on this January 12th documentary that's just going to wrap it up so nicely, where the kids in the D&D room, the basement, Jordan, this was a cool thing that they said all of them stayed the night in the basement without anybody knowing.
Yeah.
Mac or Sadie, Caleb, and all of them stayed there that night after filming their scene because they didn't want to leave. Like, that's how great that this show, these characters. I think it's amazing that they found these cast members that, for the most part, I mean, they just knocked the casting out of the park. Like, you don't really see that a lot in TV where, and I know some people have critiques of different people, but I feel like you couldn't really have casted anybody better. And I feel like that this was a beautiful ending just because you got to see real emotion from people as they're putting their D&D books up. It's them closing that chapter of their life and moving on.
Yeah. No, I'm excited to watch the documentary when it happens and see that there was no secret episode, and hopefully people can move on. And it made the news enough where people had to come out and say this wasn't happening. So I mean, at first it started as like this fringe thing that just kind of took off, but okay. Well, I guess that'll kind of wrap us up here. We shared a lot of thoughts on the show, but Logan, what do you got coming up here?
My birthday's on. No, I'm kidding.
That's true. Yeah, happy
My
birthday.
Yeah, thank you. I was waiting for it for an hour and a half, but we'll deal. We'll talk offline. No, I'm kidding. No, Jordan. I actually, and you actually don't know this. I started a podcast that'll exist under the Logjam Media branding. It's not going to try to take away from Jordan, give you just a different perspective. But it'll be covering other shows that maybe Jordan's not watching as well, but we'll all exist under the happy family of the Logjam Media. And it's going to be TV and film. I focus a lot more less on, maybe, I'll cover some of the other stuff. Like, I'll talk maybe some reaction with Marvel, and then if I have any of those episodes, I feel like having Jordan on would be fitting. So you won't see a whole lot of those, I think. And if I jump on with Jordan some, I'll share those over here. But I'm actually watching I've started a podcast. It's actually going to be called the Screen Society Podcast, because I went online, and Grab Your Popcorn podcast exists everywhere in every which direction. So I was like, I'm just going to avoid getting
I get
blamed for being that. So the Screen Society didn't really have anything, and it's really hard, Jordan. I don't know how you did this, but it's hard to come up with an original name for rewatching film. Like, it is impossible. If you look up any name, it's like, nope, that's already existed.
I know, that's why it's Top TV and not like Peak Television or Peak TV. That one was taken. So I was like, the top is the peak, though.
Yes. Yeah. Good job.
Alliteration.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right. It's hard to it's usually easy for me to come up with podcast names, but this one took me a long time. I was just doing this earlier, and so I've started to change everything. But yeah, the Screen Society podcast is what I'll call it. But we're going to cover, TV and film that I know you and I have very different tastes in different aspects, but our first show that I'm going to start doing is season 2 of The Pit, episode 1. So that'll be I've got to release an intro episode for that other podcast, but like that'll be the first rewatch podcast, or I guess recap. Is because of the Pit. So if you're not watching that on HBO Max, it's a really, really good show, and one that I thoroughly enjoy, and I know Jordan doesn't cover it. So I'll try to cover things that Jordan doesn't, just because it'll exist under kind of a same feed kind of thing. But I know you and I will both be watching the Seven Kingdom coming up, so that might be two different ones that exist, but we'll see.
Yeah. All right. Well, yeah, that's looking forward to it. I won't be able to listen to the pit ones, but I'll
yeah, no, that's totally fine. Yeah,
but,
I'll be recapping Jordan's recap. Actually, is what I'll be doing.
The recap of the recap podcast.
Yeah, exactly. I'm like, I don't know what he's talking about. I actually watched the show.
Then here, we this episode is on our Supes and Sabers feed. It's on our Top TV feed, where I'm also covering Pluribus as well, the new Vince Gilligan show. And I think I'm getting a special guest for the finale of that when I get to that. But yeah, so we'll have some good stuff.
You don't have to
there.
call me that. I'm kidding.
Yeah, it's not you, or else I would just say guest.
Oh, but, wow.
But yeah, so you can follow us at all the social media links on the description below, and check out Logan's podcast, The Screen Society. But thank you all for joining us. We'll catch you next time here, and we'll see you next time. That made no sense. We'll catch you next time.